Yeah, I'm going to introduce the panelists tonight, and we have six of them that have been willing to come on with us. 4 from Malaysia, 1 from Indonesia, and 1 from the U.S. So I will start with Selwyn Das. He is a retired diplomat. He's married with 2 children, and he worships at the Evangelical Lutheran Church, and he's involved in a ministry to equip young Christians with skills and values in the marketplace. So welcome, Selwyn. If you want to just wave.
Thank you.
Wave. Thank you. Next is Lyn Ni, and she's a trained lawyer, and she's now working in the area of child protection, and she worships in SIBKL, which is also where we go, and she's happily married, so that's good. And she said she's picking up she's been picking up new domestic skills on a weekly basis thanks to COVID-19. So good for you. Some good things coming out of that. I wish I was picking up more domestic skills as well. But anyway, David Lim, you want to give a wave, David? He's got the headset on. He is a contracts and procurement manager at Gagasan Nadi Chirgas, the construction development company. And he's married to Felicia. Felicia is also on this call, and they worship at Gospel City Church. And he likes to spend his free time playing computer games and going scuba dive. Next, Albert Moss. Albert is an old friend, I would say, from Penang. Sarah and I used to live up in Penang for many years, and so Albert was from KL, went up to Penang. Now he's back in Kuala Lumpur, and he is bivocational ministry minded. He has a burden to raise up disciples who will raise up other disciples. And he's currently the lead pastor for New Life Community Church in Subang, here in Klang Valley. And then he's also head of division for Canon Marketing Malaysia. So thank you, Albert, for being on here. And Grace Liu joining us from Jakarta. And she is the Resource Global City Director for Jakarta. And she's been sort of at the beginning of when things started there. This is the first city, one of the first cities for Resource Global, and she's been working there for over 3 or 4 years and has just done an amazing job with young leaders there. So looking forward to hear what she has to say tonight as well. And then Tommy Lee, give a wave there. He's the president and founder of Resource Global. He's got 2 amazing girls. He's married with 2 amazing little girls, and he lives in Chicago. So thank you as well. So that is our panel for tonight. And again, we're just grateful that they were willing to join us. So we have about 3 sections, 3 different questions, mainly to go through, about 20 minutes each. All right, we're going to jump into it. Probably getting tired of hearing me talk. So I want to jump into the first question. And it's related to kind of the idea for tonight was related to some of Barna's research that they put out recently in a book called The Connected Generation. They put this out a few months ago. Some of you maybe have it. They did a specific book for Southeast Asia and then a more general for the world. But many good things in there. But one quote that really stuck out, which I believe was in the invite tonight, I just wanted to read for us to just kind of launch us off here. And the quote is this. It says, 4 out of 5 practicing Christians say they want to honor God in the work they do, but very few are involved in their church, specifically for career development. Vocational discipleship is a massive need for young adults and an enormous opportunity for churches to make resilient disciples. And I just really like that end part there, an enormous opportunity to make resilient disciples. And so before we kind of get into talking kind of some of the challenges to mentoring and the generation gap, I just wanted us to just look at, kind of the end goal, the end purpose, is to be a resilient disciple. But I want to put it to our panelists. I'm going to start with Selwyn. If you want to just briefly share, what is a resilient disciple of Christ? And then if you could just share an example of someone that you would describe who has the characteristics of being a resilient disciple. What kind of person were they, and how did they impact you? Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, am I okay? Thank you, Jesse, and hi everybody. Good to see all of you here. there are so many definitions of what you may call resilient disciple of Christ. But I think we need to always remember, as children of God, we need to know the two great commandments that the Bible gives us: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So, in that respect, if you look at Micah chapter 6, verse 8, it says there, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justly?" So, a resilient disciple to me is a person who will trust in God, who doesn't flinch in times of difficulty, a person who sees God as the big picture, not the challenges or difficulties that he faces, and he goes to God in prayer first. So a resilient disciple is the one who always turns to God at every corner and aspect of his life. If you look at some biblical examples, you can see Paul in the prison wrote about 4 to 5 or 6 epistles. People always focused on God. So resilience is something you're able to withstand yourself during times of difficulties. So you must kind of one who does not lead an easy Christian life. I think he realizes that he does not lead an easy Christian life because many of us in our workplace tend to do that. We tend to flow with what's going on, and on Sundays we are very exuberant, but then Monday to Saturday we are back to our normal life, totally disconnected with what took place on Sunday. There was one famous evangelist who coined the term submarine Christians, because on Sunday you surface and Monday you go back down into the water, So and following Sunday you surface again. As an example to someone, I just I know of a pastor who's currently in not here but in the US. He's actually from Venezuela. He came to US to do some work, but because of the lockdown, he is stuck, and he's supposed to have gone back at the end of March, but the next opening for him, I'm told, is in August. So for 6 to 8 months, he's away from the family. But why I say that he's resilient, because he's looking at it positively. He's conducting online classes and training for the other pastors in Venezuela, and he's taking it very positively, and he's doing a lot of God's work. So maybe there's a plan for him, but most people, even would have probably, in a way, to a certain extent, collapsed. Say that, look, I would not want to do anything more because all I want to go home. But he says, look, God has created the situation, and therefore He'll take me through it. So he's been pretty resilient. So he was the first example that came into my mind when I read this question.
Okay. Jesse? Yeah, great. Thanks, Selwyn. How about Lyn Ni? Can you share what would be your definition of a resilient disciple of Christ? Maybe an example.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just want to also just say a shout out to Joel, who I recognize from this chat. Hi, Joel. I also had many of the same thoughts as Selwyn. In fact, I also had Micah 6:8 highlighted. So I won't mention that again. I love that verse, by the way. I think the first thought that came to mind was someone who is honest with our own flaws and weaknesses, but allow God to work through them, through trials and tribulations. And the reason why I say that was because I was thinking about myself and my own struggles to be an authentic disciple in the workplace. And even after 12, okay, not even 12, X number of years in the workplace, I still struggle with that. And I realized that we're not called to be like perfect bosses or employees or staff, but really we're called to be disciples, to demonstrate and live out Christ's values boldly in the marketplace. So as an example, and this is not really the epitome of this example of a resilient disciple, but I was thinking about my workplace and how we have a group of believers who are praying and encouraging each other. And there was one time in a large group meeting that we had, we were just greeting each other and encouraging each other about being a peacemaker, about having taming our tongue, and the next moment, as if the devil was just listening in a conversation, one of us had a spat with a colleague publicly in front of everyone, and we were all like so shocked, and the poor colleague was so filled with remorse, so ashamed, But what happened was that colleague calmed down and humbled himself and went to the other colleague, pre-believer, and asked for forgiveness, and reconciled. And now they actually enjoy a really good working relationship. And so, I mean, just a very simple example, but something that brings to mind how, we're not perfect. I think in the struggles of a workplace with a lot of pressures, you would have to daily submit to God and go to God for grace, for forgiveness, in order to be able to exemplify His values in the workplace. So I would say that the definition that I have here is one who is intentionally walking with God in the places that they've been called to. It could be the marketplace, the ministry, the home, wherever, whose identity is based on God and not based on you're not only a boss, you're not only a colleague or a mother or etc. But first and foremost, you are a child of God, and in the midst of whatever you're going through, you are rooted in Him. And I want to quote from Romans 12:12: "You're patient in tribulation, you're constant in prayer, and you submit and surrender those strengths and weaknesses to Him." And so I think in order to really achieve the above, it is really important, alongside the theme of this call, to seek out mentors, to have a community which you can journey with, like-minded community, and of course to have more wiser, experienced people to journey with, and alongside that, to have regular times with God, because only then I think we are able to have the resilience to go through the places that we're called to.
Yeah, that's good. So being able to, everything you described, being able to, of course, last for the long run, right? The marathon, not necessarily the sprint. I think we'll talk more about that. Yeah, thank you. It's a good example. How about David? David, can you share with us what resilient disciple of Christ, an example?
Someone, to me, it's someone that can balance work, church, and family, the three ministries very well, while at the same time being able to find a bit of time to actually be disciple making, like investing in few other people that is not your son or your brother, or so more often than not, from the people I know, it's always they do work and church well, and maybe the family is not great, or 2 out of 3. So it's hard. I know, but I do know a few people, which is my examples. I think my church elders do it quite well. The one I know has a business, has a good family, and he still can find time to mentor a few of us. So that's a good example for me.
Yeah, right. Good. Thanks, David. Albert, how about you?
Okay. Well, to me, a resilient disciple is somebody who is self-aware of who he is or who she is, and that person is also able to do self-assessment, whether it's at work, church, ministry, family. And I feel that a person who is a resilient disciple also has the capacity to do self-adjustment. So I look at this as somebody who can do these 3 things: self-aware of the situation and the person, self-assess, being honest about the person's walk with God, the person's capabilities and weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses, and have the courage to also be vulnerable, to make adjustments, to acknowledge his weaknesses, so that he will be able to maybe even seek help from people, or a mentor, or a friend, or somebody else, to be able to do self-adjustment. And of course, this is in the context of abiding in Christ. That means somebody who has a relationship, a dynamic relationship with Christ. So that is the model that I have in my mind of a resilient disciple. Somebody that I have in mind would be a young man. I think he's about 30, early 30. He's a graduate, Malaysian Chinese guy. He could have gone on to do different things with his career, but he felt that he was called to do missions work. And after some preparation, a few years of preparation, he's right now in a Middle East, in a Southeast Asia country, and in the midst of pandemic that is happening there right now. So he's with a team over there and writing back and telling us what is happening and what kind of prayer requests he needs. He's working there at the same time, and he's reaching out to the people there. Yeah. So looking at him, I can see that he's self-aware of who he is and who he is in God, and he has done many assessments about his situation and what he needs to do. And along the way, I knew he did some adjustment as well. Yeah. So that's an example of somebody who I think is a resilient disciple.
That's good. I think I know who you're talking about. So that's good.
Yes.
We use the young person as an example, so we can be resilient and be young, right? So that's good.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. Awesome. Grace, how about you?
Yes. Hi, everyone. A big hello from Jakarta. I love everything that Albert said, actually. The words of self-aware and self-adjustment. I think those are two key, skills that are necessary as a resilient follower of Christ. Resilience for me is not about dodging bullets. I think it's about being bulletproof. I think being resilient means that you're able to not just be anchored by what you do, but you're so anchored in the faith that you're able to shape shift in terms of your skills, your abilities, shape shift based on the needs of people around you. And so that to me is what resilience is. Maybe an example, I'll take an example of someone in the cohort. She was from our first cohort, Noah. Tommy knows her really well. Her name is Julia Tan. She studied in the same university as me, in University of Michigan. She was an interior designer. She worked in New York City. But later on in life, she was called back to Jakarta because she's okay with me sharing this story, by the way. She was called back to Jakarta because her father was sick. So she had to take over a logistics company. And so that's not within her skills and not within her passion. But she had to shapeshift in order to meet the needs of her responsibility as a daughter, right? And later on, while she was in Jakarta, she realized that our country is made out of a lot of islands, and there are a lot of islands that don't have medical access. And so she used what she had to be able to, provide medical help to the islands that don't have medical help. And so she actually flipped 2 or 3 of her shifts into floating hospitals to meet the needs that she saw. And so that to me is an example of a resilient disciple of Christ and the type of young adults that we want to continuously raise.
Right. That's great. It's a great example. Yeah. Thank you. I like the anchored, staying anchored, no matter what. You mentioned that, no matter what's happening. I think that's key.
Yeah.
Tommy, can you share with us what is a resilient disciple of Christ?
I would probably add on to what everyone said is it's the everyday person knowing that we are not perfect, that we're going to make mistakes every single day, but we are saved by grace, and our job is to really be able to be doing good works for the glory of the Lord. And so every single day, we're going to try to do our best. It's like David, a man after God's own heart. Was he perfect? Far from it. Fell, picked down, picked himself up. It's the whole idea of following Christ every single day through the good things or the bad things. And so for me, I think a lot of times the examples are the individuals who are sick with cancer or things like that, people who have dealt with trouble, who have always continued to really be able to say, Lord, I can't do it alone. Let me draw strength from you to do my very best because I've been saved by grace through the gospel.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. Very, very good. Thanks. Well, thank you. It's a good introduction. Hopefully it got everybody sort of thinking about that for ourselves. And kind of what we hope to be. I think one of my prayer requests often for myself and others, and even with my daughter this morning, just saying, when we're 80 years old, we want to finish. it's not how we begin this race, but it's how we finish. And part of that is learning how to be resilient. So very, very good. I think we'll kind of transition to the next section here, and to get more of these perspectives from the panelists. And again, just as things pop up, go ahead and put a question in the chat group there. We can ask later. But kind of moving into this topic, mentoring resilient disciples. So talking about the mentoring part. And there's a few different definitions of mentoring, I'm sure, that you've read or studied over the years. So I'll read one that we're going to kind of use for our context tonight. So in our context here, we're talking about mentoring provides an avenue for young leaders to process faith, work, and life with a more experienced Christian professional, and explore how marketplace work can be a channel for God's redemptive purposes. Of course, it also provides an opportunity for spiritual growth. So when we're talking about mentoring here, we're talking about it from a Christian perspective, which can encompass multiple areas of a person's life in addition to just their vocation. So when we think about mentoring in this context, what are the current challenges and opportunities? But maybe we can focus a little bit. What are the challenges right now for effective mentoring of young Christian marketplace leaders here in Malaysia? For those of you outside, Tommy, Grace, feel free to talk about from your own context. But I think we'll go back to Selwyn. Can you just share with us what, in your opinion, what would you say are some of the challenges these days for effective mentoring of young leaders?
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you to all my fellow panelists, I think, for all your, great inputs and comments on the first part. Yes, if you look at the question, it's what are the current challenges and opportunities for effective mentoring? So we're talking about basically effective mentoring in Malaysia. I think, first of all, we need to know what is the purpose of mentoring. Why do we want to mentor the young people? Again, if you go back to Micah 6:8, it is to do, as it says, to do justly, also to do good. So we need to instill good values into the young marketplace leaders. I think there are many, churches and other Christian organizations here who are also doing mentoring. But probably one of the, I won't say it's an issue, but probably it's not been addressed yet, is the coordination. Maybe there needs to be some coordination among organizations or individuals who are doing mentoring, so that we don't overlap with each other, or, and we need to know the target group that we are mentoring. Because you could have academics, you could have business leaders, business people, you could have people involved in social work, so the type of mentoring that they need could be different. Although there could be broad areas that could cross-cut what mentoring, but specifically in their own areas of need, we need to know what is it that they're doing. Also, I think, both the mentor and the mentee, sometimes could be just too busy, caught up with your own work. Because sometimes it's like not to say a rat race, but if you're, as somebody mentioned, balancing work life, church life, or spiritual life, and family life, so one tends to give way to the other sometimes. So it's, and the lifestyle that people are looking at, all those people want to know about God, or they want to teach about God, but sometimes they are, the lifestyle that they require. I mean, some people want to get rich quickly. Some people want to achieve something quickly. You have young people who are saying, I would like to retire by the time I'm 40 because I like to relax. So we need to understand what their priorities are. And this will depend on the type of target group that we are addressing. Jesse.
Okay. Great. Thank you. A few things you mentioned there. Coordination of tools, being able to sort of work together more, understanding target groups who we're mentoring, and being too busy, among others. So yeah, very good. Lindy, how about you? Can you tell us about from your perspective, some of the challenges for effective mentoring here for Christian marketplace leaders in Malaysia?
Sure. I think one of the greatest challenges is the division between the secular and the sacred. I think, Sarah, you know what I'm talking about. We've been talking about this in our own discussions with our friends as well. And I mean, firstly, there's not many models out there of Christian leadership at the workplace. Not because there aren't that many Christians out there. I think it's also just um, it's difficult, right? And we're all also kind of judgmental, and you know it's easy to cast judgment. But just an example, I mean, we all can think of corruption, not only in politics but also in the workplace, and we know Christians that are involved. We still work for ruthless, competitive Christian bosses who don't believe in work-life balance. The list goes on, and I'm culpable myself. And then the second thing is also just not a well-formed understanding of the call to the marketplace. So we understand what it means to be called to full-time ministry, but what does it mean to be called to the marketplace? So that's a challenge, but at the same time, I think there are opportunities for that. I think there's a growing desire, understanding amongst the next generation, and I consider myself as the next generation. You know, we want to be in jobs that are meaningful. We don't want just we've been lucky enough to not be in a generation to seek for survival, and now we're looking for the next thing. And so I think there's an opportunity there to expand that and to say, what else is God saying to you? You know, in your job, what do you hear God telling you for your next step? And just as another example, I was recently listening in onto this awesome initiative called the Global Prayer for Tech. I think a bunch of Google and Facebook employees got together in the west coast of the States and prayed together and managed to coordinate a worldwide group of people praying for technology. And even though I'm not in the sector, I related to almost everything you were praying about, you know, just the competitiveness, the ruthlessness, also the desire to really shine for God and to pray for people, and even people who you may not like. And so from that, actually, it also birthed my own initiative to see that as well at my workplace. And so, yeah, I think there are opportunities. And I mean, this discussion of mentoring is also really well timed. I am myself also in many different sort of opportunities of being mentored right now. So I think there are a growing opportunity. And I think something that Selwyn mentioned just now was also the lack of time. I won't belabor that, but I think my own struggle as well is that there are also just a lot of demands on time for a young adult who's already quite active in church. And then, you know, as a leader, you also have to disciple others. And so there's, and at the same time, I'm learning how to protect my Sabbath as well. I've not been very good at doing that. So there's just all those different demands. And then also I'm not sure whether it's the same in other cultures, but I feel like in Malaysia, there's a lack of understanding of what mentoring is. In the older generation, it could kind of be similar to, you know, the lack of understanding of fatherhood, right? Because perhaps our fathers were not also fathered themselves properly. And so same thing, just what does it mean to mentor? I think Selwyn mentioned this as well, what's the definition of mentoring? And then lastly, I also just wanted to mention an opportunity. I think in the context of the Me Too culture, Black Lives Matter, etc., we are also in this culture of asking difficult questions, or rather we seek to be in conversations which are difficult, and you see this desire amongst this generation of questioning our conduct or inherent biases. And so there's a hunger, you know, for what is the gospel saying about what's happening in this world? How do I lead my life? What's the application? So yes, I do see a lot of opportunities as well.
Yeah. That's very good. That's very good. A lot of things that you said. Besides, secular versus sacred, not understanding what is mentoring, right? Lack of time. And also not understanding the call to the marketplace, to the workplace. So thank you. That's good. David, what do you see as some challenges these days for effective mentoring here in Malaysia?
Like what I think Linny said, the older generation has never had the blessing of being mentored, I think. Paul says, the Apostle Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ, right? So if the older generation has never had that blessing of being able to or being mentored, it's going to be tough and a bit unreasonable to ask them to mentor because they don't know where to start. But that's not the only, I think, challenge. For me, I think when, like I said, when Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Christ, to say that to someone means you got to be quite transparent. You got to be pretty transparent with your mentee. And it's not easy, I think, especially for guys. And especially if you're in a workplace and you're some sort of manager or CEO, right? I mean, can you imagine having to share your struggles or your family struggles or your work struggles or your doubts with someone in the office that is younger than you, right? There's a bit of trust. You got to trust the person. And it's a lot of pride issue going there as well. So for me, that is my challenge, to be honest, when it comes to having to mentor the next generation is can I, A, find the time, and B, am I willing to be that transparent to someone in the office, you know?
Right. So you're saying that at least the previous generation, you're saying maybe they weren't mentored so much themselves. You're saying, so it's hard to pass that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's just me and my social circle, I guess. Maybe someone else in Malaysia has a different viewpoint.
Right. Yeah, that modeling. I think that's a question that's going to come up later in the Q&A about modeling as well, and how does that look in our day and age, being so busy, being so isolated. Jesus did a lot of modeling with his disciples with him all the time. So how do we do that? How does that look nowadays? So good. Albert, we hear from you. Some of the challenges that you've seen over the years.
Yeah, I agree with David. For mentoring, I think there are gaps in the modeling of mentoring. So it is difficult for people to be a mentor when they have not experienced what it felt like to be a mentee, and how a mentor is supposed to behave, what a mentor is supposed to say, what is the role, what are the boundaries. So I think there is a challenge in definitely in the even in the church that I'm in. There could be many older Christians who have been around for many years, but doesn't mean that they can be a mentor. So there are challenges in that area. The understanding of mentoring has many gaps. Yeah. And at the same time, looking for mentees, people who are willing, disciples who are willing to be mentored. I think one of the biggest challenge in an urban area like Klang Valley is the temptation to succeed. Young people are faced with temptation to succeed in many areas of their life, whether it is in career, social areas. So even people have grown up in churches, young people have grown up in churches because of the temptation to succeed in different areas of their life. They may put more priorities to career, relationships, etc., than being a resilient disciple, or being a better disciple, or aspiring to be a disciple who can disciple other people, or even being a mentor yourself. Even a young person can be a mentor, I believe. So I see that temptation to succeed as a very big challenge. And so if the younger people are not aware that this temptation can direct their energy and their focus, it can be a I wouldn't say a deception, but I would say we may think that we are doing all right. Yeah, where we are, and happy about that.
That temptation you're saying keeps young people from sort of raising their hand and saying, "Hey, I need to be mentored. I need the help."
That's right. Yeah. And the church culture that we have, I'm a lead pastor, so I need to be honest, right? And the church culture that we have, we place a lot of emphasis on ministry in churches, within the church itself. And so if we are not careful, if we model it wrongly, then the younger people may think that, hey, I've done my part. I'm already busy with my job. I need to improve in my career, in my relationships, and I'm already serving in church. So yeah, I'm doing a good job. And so I think that can be a stumbling block for people to realize that we actually all need to be mentored, even myself.
Thanks, Albert.
Yeah.
How about Grace? Can you share with us from your perspective?
Yeah. These are all really, really good insights. I think similarly in Jakarta, maybe there is a need to explain what mentoring is all about. As a millennial, I think as a millennial, so most of the cohort members that we have here in Jakarta are millennials and Gen Z. So Gen Z are about 23 and under, so they're just entering into the workforce. The millennials and the Gen Z are, I know we're talking about generations a little bit later, Jesse, but the millennials and the Gen Z, they're born into an era of the internet. And so they are very informative. They're very smart. They like things quick. And so I think they need to see what the value of mentoring is, because the last thing, I think as a young person, the last thing I would want as someone that's busy and has deadlines is to spend an hour with someone that's older that tells me what to do, right? And so I think there needs to be a clear, like, what do I get out of mentoring? I wrote 3 don'ts actually that I've been hearing a lot from the younger people here in Jakarta. It's don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me something that I can Google. And then don't tell me that my personal life and my business life is separate. And I'm only saying that out of a cultural context because, and I think this might be a little bit similar in Malaysia, a lot of the young adults that enter into Resource Global, their personal life is very much connected to their personal life because they work for family businesses. And so it's hard to say, okay, your personal life and your business life is separate. It's very hard to have someone mentor them and tell them that in this culture. And so for me, when I was listening to that verse, I think David mentioned it about Paul saying, follow me, imitate me as I imitate Christ. I feel, this is just me from the Jakarta cohort, I do feel there needs to be more of an agricultural perspective towards this instead of an industrial perspective. Instead of saying like, your growth needs to be like this. This is like an operation line of leaders that we want to build. I think it's better in mentoring just to plant a seed and let them grow in their own path, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's just my perspective.
Yeah, that's good. There's a quote here. I think you kind of, I was going to say this for later, but it's a recent quote from another Barna interview. It's related to what you said. This is with Jonathan Morrow, and he said, you can't mass produce transformation.
Yes.
Helping young people grow is a long-term endeavor. So it's kind of going back to that, you can't, it's not an assembly line of, I think strategy is good, but sometimes we can get an assembly line mentality of how to produce disciples. But, as we know it with our own kids, each one is different and you can't sort of mass produce child rearing. So it takes effort, takes time. It's a long run, like you're saying. So yeah, I like that agricultural example.
Yeah.
Tommy, how about you? What have you seen over the years and in your work around the globe?
Yeah, it's funny. Grace connected me with this one cohort member in Jakarta. She wanted to talk because she was trying to figure out her life goals. And I got on with her. First thing she says to me, Tommy, there's one thing you cannot do. Tell me no. And I realized, really? And so I think through a series of things, I was able to ask her questions she was able to process. But I think the biggest barrier, I think we're going to talk about that, is the age differences. And I spent 18 years doing high school and college ministry. The age difference is huge. And I'll give you 2 brief examples. One is I remember when I was growing up, I had an elder at my church who wanted to teach me about leadership and respect. So he took me on a 2-day retreat where I had to sit there and no questions asked and sit there and learn about submitting submission and respect under him. Drove me absolutely crazy. And then the second thing, I saw a younger person who I work with in youth group working with the older elder in our church, and the elder clearly made a mistake, but the elder would not admit that he did anything wrong. For the young people, yeah, you got to admit your mistakes. I have no respect for you if you don't admit your mistakes. That person would not admit their mistakes. And so I think a lot of times that age, from where I've seen, and even Nairobi with Mwangi here, you see the age factor really having a difference. How do you navigate through those age factors?
Right, definitely. Yeah, walking the walk is also what we're talking about. So, good. Well, this has been very good. I think I want to move into kind of our last section before we do the Q&A. Man, there's so many different questions. I think we could discuss this for quite a long time. And I think it's so crucial. There's so many things that get lost when one generation gives into another generation. And so that's what we're working toward right now. So again, from Barna, back to that, the Connected Generation book, there's another quote here I'd like to just share, which leads us into talking about how to bridge the generation gap. It says here, there is a strong entrepreneurial streak in the next generation that should inspire older leaders to invest not only capital, but also time, attention, prayer, and emotional resources. So more than just capital, but also time, attention, prayer, and emotional resources. And kind of going off of what many of you said about time, and it is I would say that's one thing when I think about mentoring, it's being lavish with your time. And I've been blessed to be mentored by somebody who was very busy, very sort of globally connected, and I was always amazed by the amount of time that they would give to us. And so let's get into this a little bit more. Just how can we bridge the gap between generations? We've talked about what is a resilient disciple of Christ. We talked about some examples. We talked about the challenges. So I think Albert has mentioned, you could be young also and be a mentor. It's not only necessarily people 10, 20, 30 years older, but you can be young and be doing this as well. But generally, how do you all feel that we can bridge the gap between generations? And so again, we'll start off with Selwyn and we'll kind of go through. But again, be preparing some of your questions for later on. We're going to go till 9:30. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Wow, so many interesting and wonderful points being mentioned by so many people. Yes, how can we bridge the gap? I think this is a big issue. I think especially in our churches in Malaysia, maybe in whole of Asia as well. I think if you want to bridge the gap, I think we have to start with the churches, because you have both the young people and the old people, the older people there. I think it's the churches will have to address this need to have mentoring. As I said, many churches are already having it, but maybe it needs to be emphasized more so that the young people will realize the value of mentoring. And I think we have to love the young people, not treat them as young, but treat them as children of God, as part of the family. The Asian culture, even we grew up in a time, as I think who was saying just now earlier, Tommy, you were mentioning, you just go there and sit and listen, and then you follow what I tell you. It's that's a kind of structure or culture I also grew up in. But then I've realized that the needs of the young people are so different. Their thinking is so different. Even with the group that I'm currently mentoring together with another colleague of mine, the 6 of them. When we talk about what are the issues or topics that affect you, it's like the East and the West. So it's so wide. So you have to love them, pray for them, find out what they need, and then have a balance between what is theory and what is expectation. Yes, we know what we want to do, but what do they expect, and then we try to find a balance so that in their particular area of interest, and then I think we can that could be the first starting point of how to bridge. It might be a long bridge to cross, but we have to start somewhere. And I think the first place we should start is our churches or small groups or whatever, and then address the other issues.
You're saying not necessarily coming with our own agenda, let's say as a mentor, but really, I guess being embedding ourselves in the lives and the culture of young people and understanding what are the real needs starting there.
Like just a quick example is, the young people here with this group that I'm dealing with are talking about challenges in relationships, open marriage, infidelity. I mean, that's to me, so I said, wow, okay, if you want to address that, okay, let's do it. So you have to know what they want and what they need.
Right. That's good. Yeah, Lindy, how about you? What would you say about bridging the gap? Another way, I think another question here would just be, how can we help prepare and launch young leaders in every sphere of life? So bridging the gap, bringing the generations together, but then, how do mentors, help prepare and launch young leaders better?
Yeah, thank you for this great question. I recently heard a really awesome panel on.
I think she's frozen. Sorry, Lindy. Hopefully she'll come back. David, are you there? David is also frozen. Or am I frozen?
No, are you okay?
Okay, so we got
can hear
David.
you.
What about Albert?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and take over?
Okay, all right.
Oh, I think we came back. Go ahead, Albert.
Well, okay. How can we bridge the gap between generations? I think the key is...
Sorry, Lindy. We'll come back to you. Lindy. We'll come back to you. You froze up there. You and David froze up at the same time.
I think one of the key is for the mentor, the potential mentor, particularly if they are from the older age bracket, to take the initiative, to have a perspective of not like in the Chinese kung fu movies, you have the master and the student, and the master knows everything, and the student has to listen to whatever the master tells the student to do. I think the initiative is in the hand of the mentor, the older group who is mentoring the younger one. They have to come down to their level. I think that is one of the best way to bridge the gap. For example, when it comes to music in church service, there is always a difference of opinion between the older folks and the younger generation. The younger generation love to have faster beat music, but the older folks don't seem to be able to follow that. And I heard a speaker once said, and he was speaking to everybody, and he said that why can't the older folks just allow the younger ones to enjoy and to worship in the kind of music that they love? Because the older folks already has gone through certain phase, and they are more mature, so they can humble themselves actually and accept the music of the younger folks for their sake and not for their own sakes. Yeah, so I think the initiative is with the older guys, the older folks, to bridge the gap.
And you mean for them to adapt? Is that what you mean? To adapt?
Yes, for them to come down from their level, to empathize and to understand the younger generation. So I'm talking in the sense of an older generation and a younger generation, since we're talking about a gap between generation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because very often the older generation may have the thinking that they they know more than the younger ones. So if we have that mindset, I think it's going to be difficult for the mentoring to work.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Albert. Lindy, we'll go back to you. You're unfrozen now, so.
Yeah, sorry, I had no idea what happened. So I was saying that I think there's a need to communicate to the younger generation that they are needed, not just wanted for the sake of ticking a box of diversity of ages. And so I think that looks like including and incorporating, the voices, the perspectives, the participation of both the older and the younger generation in across the board. I mean, we're talking about mentoring, but before that, we have to acknowledge, even in the culture that we have, that we don't even have, not only churches but also in the marketplace, in our culture, that there isn't a welcoming or a nurturing approach towards the younger generation. And so, we would need to address that. And even for myself, even in my 30s, as it was already highlighted, there is also a huge generational gap with the 20s, with those younger than me. And I realized that I would also have to do the same, if I want to reach out to them, that I also need to, as was mentioned by Albert, to come down at their level, or rather to go up to their level, and be relevant and speak their language as well. And so I was just reflecting upon everyone's reflections just now, and I think one of the ways to bridge the gap would be to have a shared purpose. And I think we see that very clearly in church, right? That we have, and I'm privileged to be in a multi-generational church where we are connected and invested in a common goal. And I think just an illustration was that I used to be part of the prayer ministry. And I think similarly, we also had the same challenges, in terms of worship music, different tastes of worship music. And as myself, as a younger generation, I realized that I also needed to accommodate the older generation's preferences, and in order to honor God, in order to honor unity in prayer, that we would also want to sometimes intentionally choose older hymns and songs, and even adapt to the style of prayer so that we can flow together, so that we can seek God together. So similarly, I think mentoring, what is the goal of mentoring? I mean, we're not, if it's just about your own personal goals, your own desire to develop yourself in your career, it's not sufficient. I think there should be a bigger goal, that we are mentoring and each other for a reason, which is to disciple a nation together, right? To shine God's light together and to glorify His name together in the marketplace. And until we do that together, we cannot see that broader goal. And I think a reflection on this was also just reading the Bible recently about how the mention of God, he calls himself, and he is called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? He doesn't just see like one person, one generation. He sees them all in throughout the generations. And so he sees all of us in our infancy, in our teenagehood, in our adulthood, all at once. And so I think it's amazing to just see, even here on this panel, the different generations, and to see how we're all connected, and how, even for myself, I already have to think about the legacy that I'll be leaving behind for those younger than me. So I think it'd be really great to really put forth, what is the shared purpose that we're doing this for this bigger goal. And then finally, I won't repeat what was mentioned about the change of attitudes and approaches. I think that was highlighted really well already. But I think just lastly, I think there's also a need for forgiveness. Maybe this goes beyond your question about mentoring. I think I'm going back again to the culture, and I think we've also seen that in churches, right? Like there's also generational hurts amongst the different generations. And so perhaps there's also a need to ask for forgiveness and to reconcile the different generations as well. So I'll just stop there.
That's great. Thanks, Lenny. That's good. David, how about you? Maybe you can share a little bit about bridging the gap, and also, go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely resonate with what Albert said about this whole master-apprentice thing going on. So I'm not going to add to that. But I must say, as a mentee and a mentor, I find that as mentees, I made the mistake at the start of my Christian life of just sitting back and expecting someone to mentor you. I think it's important as someone who's younger to start those conversations, seek out those conversations, go and mingle with the older folk. Don't just be cliquish. So and be approachable, kind of thing. And as a mentor as well, I'm learning to be approachable. I'm learning to go mingle on the other side with the younger people. Aside from that, I think it's awareness. I know I'm just speaking from my personal experience, but in my last 5 years, since I've been back in Malaysia, I used to be in Australia. I have not been hearing many sermons from the pulpit that bring up the issue about discipling the next generation. Unfortunately, so I think it's one way to breach it is for churches to start preaching discipleship, being faithful to the text, of course, but also preaching the gospel in a way that is relevant to the workplace, so that we start breaking down that whole circular sacred divide. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Before I ask Grace, maybe, anything else from say younger generation? I think. Okay. Go ahead, Grace. Why don't you share? Let's see if you cover it, and then I might ask a follow-up question. So.
Yeah, I can speak on behalf of the younger generation, since I think culturally, like in terms of generation, like culturally, I think I align myself a bit more with the millennials. I've actually put in some time studying millennials, studying my own generation, because I wanted to know how to reach out to my own generation and how to build up resilient leaders in my own generation. And so I think a big part of that is understanding kind of the culture of the generation. And those that are millennial here, you can disagree with me, but what I've learned is that the millennials are more of an emotional and more of an experiential generation. Maybe in compared to my parents' generation, they're Gen X. And so they're more of a, you know what, emotions are important, but they're not important because I need to work to feed my kids. And that's what's important right now. So they have this like grits to get things done. That's my parents' generation. But for my generation, for the millennials, we're more, I think we care about, are we seen? Are we known? Do I feel like I belong? And so those elements are very important, I feel like, to the younger, to the millennial generation. And so if we wanted to bridge the gap, I think if you wanted to reach out or mentor someone younger, it's really important to go through the heart instead of through knowledge, instead of through like, I know what to do. This is what you need to do to get things done. It's more from the I see where you're going through. And so I do see that as kind of a way to bridge the gap from the older to the younger generation. I wrote down 3 things actually in terms of mentoring, of how to bridge the gap. Number 1 is I think that there needs to be aligned expectations. And so what are the things that are expected from a mentee? You know, I expect you to be proactive. I expect you to be more vulnerable. I expect you to be more authentic. And from the mentor, you know, what are the expectations for that as well? Number 2, there needs to be mutual respect. So mutual respect in terms of age. Just because, you know, I'm younger and I've used the internet more, you know, doesn't mean that I know better. At the same time, just because I'm older and I have more experience doesn't mean that I know better as well. And number 3 is trust, for there to be a safe space to be vulnerable. And so I think those are 3 important elements that are needed to bridge the gap in mentoring.
Yeah, it's really good, really helpful. So aligned expectations, you said, mutual respect and trust. And again, kind of going back to the agricultural example, just a lot of that takes time. You can't necessarily speed up that process. And so I think definitely those who are mentoring have to be willing just to be lavish with their time, give up their time, you know, to be sacrificial with their time to be able to facilitate that kind of relationship. That's really good. Tommy, how about you for bridging the gap?
Jesse, I work with Grace, who is a lot younger than I am at Jakarta. And then Noah is another guy in our office who is a lot younger than me. I realize my key to working with a lot of those guys, and even in terms of many of the years working in youth ministry, is learning to ask questions. If I sit there and just lecture Grace the entire time, she'll just tune out me after a while. And she'll probably say yes and whatever, but it's just a mutual respect. I spend a lot of time asking questions and trying to learn from her perspective, trying to understand where she's going. And even the same thing, Noah and I in our office disagree on a lot of things, but he has a lot of valid points. So I try very hard to listen, and because it's different than how I would do things. Now, once in a while, and then when that day comes, is when I say, hey, Grace, Noah, we're going to have to make this decision because this is why. And I explain that decision, then they understand. But we've had that conversation, and over time, we built that trust. But I think the key thing is, I think David mentioned it, is I think it does come down to the pastor of that church to help people understand how to mutually disciple and care and really, really be able to invest in different generations.
That's good. You touched on some skills there. I mean, everybody's touched on that, but maybe before we move into the Q&A, anybody can jump in from the panelists. Just for mentors, again, to bridge the gap, what are some skills? If we could get a little bit more practical. So Tommy mentioned being able to ask questions, learning to ask questions. How about some other skills? Grace talked about trust, mutual respect. But if, say you're somebody on the call here, you've done a little bit of mentoring, or you might be interested to do more, and you're sitting down with a mentee, what are going to be the skills that they're going to need in that moment? Albert, maybe I'll ask you.
Sure. Listening skills.
Yep.
Listening skills for a mentor. I think the temptation for a mentor is to correct, or to teach, or to tell. I think for a mentor to be effective, I think the mentor needs to cultivate the listening skill very conscientiously. Otherwise, we may fall into our normal mode. Yeah, that depends on our character as well. Like me, I'm a very high D person, very high driven. And I have to be very careful, very mindful about what I'm saying, because I can get, if I'm not careful, I can dominate the conversation. So I intentionally have to remind myself to take a back seat, and as what Tommy mentioned, to ask questions. So I think that listening skill is one of them. Asking questions, definitely listening skills, yeah.
Yeah, you think about, I think sometimes is we can suck all the air out of a room, or suck all the air out of a conversation by all of our amazing advice, right? So starting with listening is humbling and good.
Yeah.
How about you, Selwyn? What are some skills besides listening?
Right. I just come on board together with Albert on the skill of listening, because you have to know what they want and find out what their area of interest is, because sometimes it is so divergent that if you don't listen to them, you don't know what they need. The second, I think, is attitude. We need to know that we don't know everything, but yet there's things we can impart, and there are things that we can learn. So this trust element, which was mentioned earlier, comes into being. And thirdly, I think is, whatever we do is to be hands-on application. Just don't talk. Get onto the ground with them and do it with them. If they need help, sit with them and guide them, or show them how it needs to be done, and then let them do it. But take an instructor's role and get them to do it. If they make mistakes, let them do it. Encourage them all the way, because they are going to be the next set of leaders. So you need to impart what you can to them. So hands-on approach, I think, is very important, together with listening.
Yeah, I think that's good. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Hey, Jesse, can I add in one thing? My
Sure.
best mentor, who I've always met with, never gave me the answers. He kept asking me to lead me on a journey. I've always appreciated it. And he always kept asking questions. Hey, think about this. And he showed me the options. I have valued that mentorship in years and years. He never, ever gave me any answers, but helped me process things.
That's so true, Tommy. I think my mentor does that very well with me as well. And I'm not just saying it because I think he's here. I think like what Grace said, I mean, we know the answers, especially those who've been to Sunday school. I think what we want and what we should be doing, and I struggle too because I sometimes just want to give you the answer, is to discuss the struggle instead of just giving you a utopian solution. Just a simple example for myself. I don't need to know that being bad-tempered is wrong and I should be patient. But I really appreciate it when my mentor discusses with me why I lost my temper, how the gospel can help me repent, help me change, how I can apply the gospels in all these situations I find myself in. And that I find actually makes the real change in my heart, as opposed to sort of buckling down and having to just not get angry.
Yeah.
So yeah, discussing a struggle as opposed to giving an answer.
Hey, Jesse, can I add one more thing to what David said as well too?
Go ahead.
My seminary professor said this to me, and to this day, he still comes alongside, mentors me. He says, "Hey, Tommy, you're always looking ahead, always trying to figure out what life is going to give you. You need to stop and learn how to reflect." So he's always emphasized the importance of reflecting upon the journey and lessons that God has given you. He says, if you don't reflect, you'll never learn the lessons that God has for you in your life. That has always been something he's helped me to process.
Amen. Don't want to walk around a desert for 40 years.
Actually, Tommy, sorry, Jesse.
No,
Tommy
go ahead,
mentioned something that really is important in terms of mentoring. I realized that when my mentor tells me the why is this important? Like, not just go reflect, it's important, and that's it. Like, the why behind why, everything that you're kind of sharing, I think is very important, so that they see the bigger picture and the bigger context. I'm not just telling you to do something because I think it's good, but there is a big impact of how this will influence the way you live your life. And so I do feel like the why is very important. And also David mentioned, I think it's also really, I think it's really a blessing to me when I have a mentor that's not trying to fix me all the time, but a mentor that is just there to listen with me and help me process through thoughts. But at the end of the day, I will make my own decisions. But if there's a mentor that's just there to give me guidance, not exactly try to fix every single mistake in my life, but just give me guidance along the way, I think those are some important skills as a mentor as well.
And Jesse, if I may just add, I think it's important for the mentor to link the challenges that the young people are facing with the Word of God.
Yeah.
How the Bible can provide solutions for them. Like if you're walking through a crisis, or if you're having some financial difficulty, what is the solution you can find in the Bible? And lead it to them and let them decide whether they wish to follow or not.
Right. Anchoring it back there, the Word of God. We're going
Can I
to...
just add as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Please, Lindy, go ahead. Go ahead and throw any questions you have in the chat. If you have any questions, go ahead and put those in there. We'll transition there. But go ahead, Lindy. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one. Also, I think alongside processing, I was thinking about the mentors in my life too, who has, questioned the motives that I had in doing this or doing that. And as everyone else said, it's not so much about the lecturing or even just giving the answers, but really just to be a guide the mentee to a place where you're led to reflect and go to God and say, is my heart right? So I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, very good. So as I said, this is really good. I think, as I said, we could probably go on for a long time. So throw any questions you might have there in the chat group. Related to what we talked about, I think Selwyn talked about getting into I think you said something like the practical, the nitty gritty. How does that look nowadays? A lot of times nowadays it's meeting in a coffee shop or meeting, it's not necessarily on the job or out, kind of where Jesus took a lot of his disciples with him. They're always with them. I think about my kids, our kids are our first disciples, really, right? They're always with us, whether we like it or not. And so, they see everything, the good and the bad, and there's so many opportunities just while you're walking, while you're sitting, while you're driving, to just be an example of them, to plant seeds, of the gospel in them. How does that look nowadays when we talk about mentoring? Because I think we've all agreed that it takes time, it takes willingness to be available. What does modeling look like nowadays, given the business and sometimes disconnected life that we have? Anybody can jump in on that.
Jesse, I think being intentional is very important. Being intentional about mentoring, about discipling somebody is very important. It can be in different framework, it can be in different situation, but I think being intentional is very important to have a same agenda, to have a goal, to understand that it is a process and it takes time and it takes investment, commitment, and also I think being vulnerable both from the mentor as well as the mentee, being vulnerable to one another and with that trust there. Yeah, I think that intentionality is very important to begin with.
Jesse, if I may add, I think in addition to what Albert said, being available to the mentee, that it's no more like in a structured way, but if he calls you up at odd hours and if you're committed to mentoring, you must be prepared to meet them anywhere. And as you said, even in a coffee shop or coffee place or whatever, or wherever the opportunity to meet and to, if not at all, at least on Zoom or on the phone, we must be available for them. And once they know that you are available for them, they will keep coming to you.
Right. That's good. Question here. What is the difference between imitating Christ and following Christ? And is there even a difference? I think David talked about that verse. But anybody would like to jump in on that one? Just give a brief answer. What's the difference between imitating Christ and following Christ?
My quick answer to that, because I don't actually know the answer, is I looked it up, 1 Corinthians 11, and it appears to be used synonymously in different translations. So maybe it's the same.
I was also thinking too, I was like, I think it means the same thing. It's just that what does it mean to imitate and follow Christ, right? I think maybe just we have to kind of see how Christ, the attitude of Christ towards his followers, right? I think a lot of times in the church, we always say, come as you are, because Jesus says, come as you are. But sometimes, and a lot of maybe the older churches, they're actually saying, come as we are. Conform to us, behave like us, then you're allowed, right? In this church or something. But I think to imitate Christ is not having this kind of attitude, like the point finger attitude, but having the open arms kind of attitude. And so, I don't know. I think to imitate and to follow Christ, I think is the same thing. But I think our understanding of what it means to behave like Christ, I think is something that we need to dive a little bit deeper into.
Yeah, Jesse, it's quite difficult to draw a very strong distinction, but imitating Christ is, showing love and compassion when people come to you with a problem, even to your fellow workers or family, or even they do something wrong. It's Jesus showed all the time. Jesus showed love to people, even to the sinners and to the scribes and the Pharisees, to Zacchaeus, a tax collector. Following Christ would mean that, are you willing to sacrifice time to do something? Are you prepared to give time to the church, to mentoring, to some spiritual activity, to Bible study? So it causes, because, Jesus said, if you decide to follow me, don't look back. So, are you prepared to leave behind the things that are material to you and come and do his work? So I would look at it that way.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Another question here from Elvin up in Penang. Is there any thought or suggestion on mentoring to non-believers in the workplace? How to balance how to balance being too religious versus a good listening ear? So yeah, we've been talking mostly about mentoring disciples, resilient disciples. But how about as it relates to those that are not yet believers, maybe you could say, right? So pre-discipleship in a sense. Anybody want to give a thought on that?
Jesse, I worked in the corporate world for about 12 years building cell towers. During that period of time, I'm a young project coordinator, and so by the name of Erin. And so I spent a lot of time working with her because she worked directly with me. But one of the things that she had to deal with was she had now 3 miscarriages. And so a lot of times she sits there and says, how in the world do you still love your God? How do you still love when he allows these things to happen? And so a lot of times it was just talking with her now about life, and whenever possible, I just talked to her about my own spiritual journey. And I just gave her a Bible. I didn't really preach the gospel to her or anything like her. Lo and behold, now 8 years later, I am struggling with cancer. And she then Facebooks me to tell me, I still have the Bible that you gave me 8 years ago. I came to know the Lord, now have 3 beautiful daughters because your words resonated with me. You never know. I think you just try to really be available and just be part and just minister and care for them in your life.
Yeah, that's great.
I think, Tommy, if, it's always a challenge in the workplace. And if people were to ask you what is the hope that you have, I think, if we adopt what 1 Peter 3:15 says, that why we have the hope, I think we just, they see that kind of life that we lead, that not exactly preaching, but that, we are doing well in whatever we do. And even though we face challenges, we don't lose hope. And then our own character and attitude will make them ask questions why we have this hope. So that's one way of mentoring, because the way we do things and the way we approach things and the way we solve problems itself will make people wonder, why is it that you are different from others?
Right.
I work with predominantly Muslim, so my whole team is Muslim. So I can't technically share the gospel with them. So what I try to do is just to be the best Christian I can be around them. So love them, care for them, struggle through their work with them, take the time to teach them, and like what Selwyn said, just being that example, so that one day I'm hoping they will ask, so that they know this is what a Christian should be. And I think what they really appreciate is that when you do make a mistake, you confess to it. When you do accidentally, raise your voice a bit too loud, or you apologize and try, and don't justify it by saying, someday just say, what I did was wrong. I don't think people should do that, and I'm sorry. I did that, and I'm gonna do better, and I'm sorry. So I think then they really, really see, that Christ is different, and that's how I try my best to mentor them and hopefully start conversations.
Yeah, I think the beauty of what the question there, I think the beauty of that is everything we've been discussing tonight, so many of these principles apply to non-believers as well, right? And we talk about trying to squash the sacred and secular divide. I think this is a perfect example of that. We talk about trust, mutual respect, learning to ask good questions, giving your time. I think calling forth, potential in people, what you see in people, and really, being willing to encourage those that you see good things happening. They're doing things well. So many different things that carry over, but I think all of us have kind of hit on that as well. Just, of course, walking the walk. So I think we're going to have to probably call it quits there today. And Lindy, did you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly. I think the only answer is just do it. I think there's just such a need right now for a listening ear. Just a very quick testimony, because we had, we were all working from home during COVID-19. A non-believing friend, a colleague actually reached out to a believing colleague and was just saying, wow, how do you deal with coping with all this uncertainty and the stress of COVID-19? And since you're someone of faith, tell me more about your faith. And I was so encouraged by that, because I think sometimes even with not preaching at all, people can already tell that there's something about a believer that is different, and there's a hope that cannot be explained. So I would say just do it, like go ahead and mentor, because that's just such a need. And don't even worry too much about being too religious or not religious. I believe God will guide you. Yep.
Well, that's good. I think there's many more questions and thoughts we have. I think we will kind of bring it to a close for tonight. You guys have all been amazing being on here tonight. And just as I mentioned in the beginning, okay, second commercial, and then we'll let you jump off here. But this January, as I said, we're planning to launch our first mentoring cohort here in Kuala Lumpur, hopefully with about 10 to 12 young marketplace leaders. And again, so we're looking for mentors, those who would be open and willing to come alongside one or two of these young people for 8 months and just help them process through what some of the teaching, the curriculum, some of the community events that we'll be doing, speakers, and just kind of walking with them where they're at. Of course, we're also looking for mentees, people who'd like to be considered for the first cohort as well. But I just want to thank all the panelists. Thank you for your wisdom and your experiences and all the time that you put in tonight and gave us tonight. And I want to thank everyone